What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale, joined by, as almost always, my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes, and we are super excited and grateful to be joined by, for the first time ever, Bleacher Report's NBA draft analyst slash insider slash expert slash maven. He is everything when it comes to the NBA draft. Jonathan Wasserman. When you're watching this, or if you're reading this in the podcast, go follow him on Twitter. I'll have his handle, the links to all that stuff, and even his VR profile in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. Was, I know this is just a fucking crazy time of year for you. So Grant and I are super appreciative that you made the time to come on with us. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm fine. I mean, people kind of overblow this period. Like, honestly, there's no games to watch. It's just a lot of like texting, calling, writing, like, I guess a mock draft every other day. But otherwise, no, I'm good. I'm just like, the closer you get to it, the more anxious you are to see what the actual results are and how much time I spent overthinking this the stupid mock draft boards.
So I got a question right off the bat that's off script, but that's how this is going to go. I think, at least from my end. I'm surprised to hear that this isn't the craziest time for you, but now that you explain it, I understand. Like, at this point, it's kind of just like waiting, I guess, because you've done all your film work, you've talked to who you need to talk to. I think, so now is it just like monitoring what, if anything, is changing in terms of like consensus, or like, are you? Because if it were me, I know right now I would be going back and like questioning everything that I had arrived at as a conclusion over the course of the year, and kind of trying to wrestle with some self-doubt and all that stuff. And like, how sure am I about what I think about these things? Is that a place you get to at this time of year, if ever, or is it just kind of, it's out of your hands at this point?
I was just telling Dan right off the air, like I'm not watching any more games. If I was in charge of a team, I would say you could only watch a guy so many times, because then you start to overthink little things and overvalue, the recency bias and all that stuff. So for my own personal rankings, I actually have my like last big board coming out next week. I'm not going to watch any more games at this point. I've seen enough. Really, from here on out, it's talking to agents, talking to teams, exchanging information, and
coming on these dumbass podcasts
and coming on these podcasts, right? But it's fun. It's like I could just like put the tools down and just like talk and not have to do as much. I guess even like realistically, not as much writing, not as much analysis, because there's not much to analyze at this point. I'm not analyzing what a guy does in an empty gym. So now it's just asking around, deciding what's true, false. Like, I guess my objective at this point in terms of my job is to get the draft right. And so that's what I'm focused on, not necessarily my own personal evaluations.
Got it.
I'm going to fold these two questions together because they've become cliches with this draft. So first off is that everyone thinks it's an unimpressive draft class, or they're low on it. And so my first question would be, is that accurate, or is it an exaggeration relative to, well, we're not super high on these projected top 5 or 7 guys? Then the second part of that is, how actually wide open is this draft at the top? Like, is it, we always see, it feels like manufactured BS sometimes when it comes to like who's going to go number 1. Some years it's more legitimate than others. This one, it feels like an actual mystery. So the twofold question is, one, is this draft class really that unimpressive once you get away from the top? And then 2, how wide open, even relative, if you want to compare it to all these other drafts that you covered, how wide open is it actually at the top?
So first of all, I'll say this, like when the draft process started and you started reaching out to teams, like my go-to line first was like, yeah, it's pretty, unfortunate draft, right? And every single time I'd hear back, like, actually, I like it better than most think. So I don't know if that's just at this time you tried to start talking yourself into some of these guys, but the NBA teams don't sound as like down on the draft as the media does. I think the problem with the draft is, and I kind of use this term every time there's a draft like this, it's like, it's just tougher to identify who the stars are going to be. Like there's a lot of guys who could be really good. They just don't pop out like as obvious, surefire stars at this point. And starting at the top of the board, like Zaccharie Risacher is projected to go number 1, or at least that's who I have going number 1. There's no way in my mind I think he's going to be the best player in the draft, but I can understand why a team would take him number 1, because he's kind of like the surest bet, and nobody at number 1 wants to take too big of a risk here. Mm-hmm. It's definitely wide open. When I say wide open, like I think there's like maybe, it's Risacher, Alex Sarr, the big names. I guess Donovan Clingan has a chance, particularly if somebody trades up. But I can't really picture another guy going number one. But also, if I were to be totally blown away, like this would be the year that could happen. And it reminds me of my first year at Bleacher Report, 2013, when
Oh my God.
yeah, when Anthony Bennett went one, and I was like, it was my first year on the job, and all I wanted to do was get this right. And I had Bennett going, I don't know, like 10, and he comes out and says Anthony Bennett with the first pick. I'm like, shit, I'm getting fired. I don't know what I'm doing here, but yeah, it's like that draft where you don't know who it's going to be. You think there's like a couple guys it could be, but if there was ever going to be a draft where like you hear a totally surprise name, this could be that draft.
So you mentioned Risacher as you expect to, or at least one of the two primaries, I feel like in their discussion right now for the number one pick. You mentioned Clingan too. When you look at Risacher specifically, and I guess maybe it's the best way as we go through these players to kind of frame it as what most would excite you or impress you about this prospect, and then what's the biggest red flag for him. And so with Risacher, the one specific question I would have though, in addition to that, is he someone who might benefit just looking at what he's able to do away from the ball on offense and in transition that's going to benefit a lot and maybe have more of an immediate offensive impact because of what NBA spacing, depending on where he lands, of course, should do for him?
Yeah. I mean, if he goes to Atlanta, it's a pretty good spot, right? He already has two high level creators with Trey and DeJounte. I assume that they're still there next year. And he can just kind of play the same role that he's playing overseas, which is get out in the open floor when you have the chance and use your athleticism or spot up off the ball and kind of take advantage other than the catch and shoot opportunities. But, he can slash to the basket when there's space to do it. Now, he doesn't really have like too many moves in his bag to create advantages in one-on-one situations, but he can get to the basket when there's space. He's big and long and takes big strides. And so again, it would be a pretty easy transition for him if he does go to Atlanta. And then you hope that after a couple of years of like building up his confidence as a complimentary guy, that he starts to, slowly he'll get more on-ball reps and as long as the team understands that he's not going to come in right away and be a go-to guy. And I think he's a pretty good fit for Atlanta, but also really any team. I mean, I guess the other one is Washington, which is kind of the opposite, where if he goes to Washington, he's going to be thrown into the fire right away in terms of the reps he's going to get. It's going to be a totally different type of usage, being a lot more often on the ball. And so I'm not really sure what's the best for him. I think I kind of like the first situation a little bit better, but realistically, to me, that's still his most realistic outcome. And is a complimentary guy. Like I hate having to compare everybody in this business, but Harrison Barnes, like a better Harrison Barnes, is kind of the type of player, not the exact guy, but the type of player I kind of anticipate him being. Is just really not a 1 or 2 option, but a complimentary shot maker who can kind of capitalize in the right spots.
So it's interesting you mentioned Harrison Barnes, because I've done a fraction of the film work that you've done, but in watching Risacher, I just kept thinking high floor, don't know about the ceiling. Like I think he has so many of the role playing characteristics you would want. Hawks, like you said, are like kind of tailor made for what he does well. And I'm also like kind of wary of getting stuck on this low ceiling thing, because that was the knock on Brandon Miller, and I think he showed as a rookie that maybe that ceiling's quite a bit higher and he can do quite a bit more than people conventional wisdom thought he could do. For Risacher specifically, like what do you, and this is a little unfair because I'm asking you to project on a guy that's so young still, but like what would you imagine if you were to hit his ceiling or whatever that is? Like what skills that he maybe isn't showcasing right now, but you think maybe are there, whether that's individual shot creation, whether that's really, really disruptive on-ball defense to go with some of the other stuff that he's already good at. Like, what is the path towards, just because if he's a number one pick, a lot of teams go with like, I just want the highest possible outcome for this guy. So, and for Risacher, just from watching him, like I'm struggling to see struggling to imagine what that looks like for him, where it's like, oh my God, he clearly should have been the number one pick,
Yeah.
So how does he get there? Like what skills do you think realistically could improve to get him all the way up to justifying that spot?
I mean, I think the big one is just the ball handling. I mean, he can handle it in the open floor, but like, so can everybody. You even see bigs take a defensive rebound and like at least make a move here and there. It's in those tight windows when he's got to operate in the half court where it's a little bit loose. It gets stripped a little too often. and he really can't create those advantages himself. And so that obviously takes his game to a whole new level. Now, really, you have to do a little bit of guesswork in terms of is he going to make that jump? And I this is where NBA teams have a little bit of advantage over me. Like I don't get to talk to him, I don't get to interview him all the time, and really get to know him the way some of these teams will over the next month. But I did watch him in the junior levels, and it's a different type of game in the junior levels in the U21 league in France. And he was a guy who averaged like 5 assists per game and made plays. But I mean, so did Jeremy Sohan. And you know, it's like hard to know what to buy and what not to buy. But yeah, 19 years old, like I could see why a team would be willing to, you know, gamble on his development, knowing that you do have that high floor to lay back on. But yeah, that's what he's got to do. He's got to get better, you know, in one-on-one situations. And, you know, a best case for him, like I think a realistic best case would be like, you know, Michael Porter. I think a different type of best case would be like a Franz Wagner, who's used more in ball screen situations, you know, a big wing who can make plays a little bit off the dribble. And we'll see how his frame fills out, but a guy who can guard 3s and 4s, like I think that's I don't watch as much NBA as you guys do, but in my mind, at least the last time I saw Franz, he was a little bit more of like a guy you can give the ball to and make some plays, as like a big wing ball handler type.
Yep.
Alex Sarr, what is the, so actually I want to ask this question first about him. How real is the idea or the concept of his shooting and his ball handling? You mentioned anyone can handle it in the open floor, and that's been something that people latch on to. Do you see either of those skills or both of them to where, oh, he can actually face up and handle the ball and do things in traffic in the NBA, or he's going to become a really consistent jump shooter, maybe even create more of those for himself? Or is that sort of like, are we jumping the shark by hoping that he can, you know, let those skills marinate and they become viable weapons at this next level?
Yeah. So I'm going to name drop like a position. I told a GM the other day that I think Sarr, the draw to Sarr is just the idea. He's just like an idea at this point. Whether or not he's going to become, you know, these flashes are going to become regular parts of his game, you know, there's a little bit of guesswork in it. But right now, I don't expect him to jump onto an NBA floor and start hitting pull-up threes and shoot 35% from 3 and put the ball down, you know, in the half court and spin into a fadeaway, like maybe like once in a while. But that is not going to be part of his game. And you know, I don't have Sarr in my top 2. You know, still debating exactly where I'm going to put him, probably closer to 5, because I'm not buying the offense right now. So in my mind, early in his career, he is going to be, you know, a flash guy who kind of does his damage offensively, you know, play finishing and using his athleticism around the basket. And of course, you know, he'll hit the occasional spot up 3. He's got some pretty strange mechanics that showed in person at the NBA Combine. So, you know, we'll see how. And he's not a great free throw shooter either. I'm not buying it anytime soon. Like, could it? He's so young. Could it happen down the line? Like, it could, but I wouldn't want to use a high pick to bet on it. But really, the draw again is right. The defensive versatility is such a valued thing, I think, in today's league, and like I don't see how that part of his game doesn't translate.
That's what I was going to ask. That's the carrying skill right now, right? It's essentially this idea of he's going to be able to move his feet in space, turn his hips, like, and then obviously, you know, every highlight reel of him is littered with help side blocks and things like that. So like that's going to be there. Everything else for him seems like, well, maybe he's more Giannis, or maybe he's more Serge Ibaka, or maybe he's more, I don't know, like Stromile Swift or Tyrese Thomas, if you want to go like deep cuts, like that's going to be there. Like that is the reason, if he's got the high floor, again, to use that term, it's that defensively, he's going to be fine, like at worst.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of reminds me of Evan Mobley. It's like, you can kind of bank on him being a big who can guard all over the floor, different, you know, sets, different spots on the floor, different positions. He really moves his feet well. I think that's more his defensive mobility away from the basket is more impressive than his shot blocking, than his rim protection. To me, that's more valuable. And then offensively, right. He's a complimentary offensive guy. I can't picture Mobley ever being like a top option, but every now and then he blows up and has a good game where some of those specialty shots, you know, he hits a couple in a row, or he pulls off a couple moves that like you don't see on a normal basis. Like he's got them in his bag. How sharp is he going to make them over time? I don't know. Right now, they're not too sharp. I just really can't picture him being a guy with the ball And to me, obviously, if you're not obviously, but I think if you're Sarr, you want to go to a team that already has creators, and you're not put in that position where you kind of look bad early on. But in Washington, obviously, he'd have a lot more freedom to experiment and try new things. And I think it's going to look ugly early on. I just don't think he's polished enough to pull it off. But, long term, who knows? I think it could just take a while offensively.
Moving on to Nikola Topic, what does the partially torn ACL do to his ceiling and floor for you when you're looking at where he could be drafted?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm talking to somebody right now about what the deal is with him, and we're still waiting. And I talked to a big time guy the other day who thinks that he's going to need surgery. And the doctors I've talked to say partially torn means you kind of just rehab it on your own until like you feel good. But I guess the American doctors have to diagnose him and go through what the proper plan would be. And this is like the eye of the beholder for every team. I really don't know. He can go. I can't picture him going top 7 anymore. Like I always had. What's that?
Oh, I said, okay. That was really what I was curious.
Yeah, because if you're saying, listen, just going through the draft order, if you're the Spurs at 4, that was the team I always thought would take him. But now, Detroit at 5, they're probably not going to take him. Charlotte at 6, hard to picture them taking him with LaMelo. And 7, there's no spot for another ball dominant guard in Portland. So you think that if you're San Antonio, you take, your big wing first, and then you could probably get him at 8 anyway. So I think he can go 8. I surprisingly think he can go 9 to Memphis, but it really does matter on what these doctors say. And then as you move down the board, it's like, well, who wants to just take the best player available? Because a lot of these teams already have point guards. Could Sacramento take him and say, like, let's take some pressure off De'Aaron Fox? And, I don't know. I would think Sacramento may want a guy who can help them earlier. I feel like there's pressure to win. But, I don't know. I don't really have a good answer because it's all in the eye of the beholder of the pick and whether they care or not about this upcoming season and what their evaluation was before the injury. Like I would say 8 to 15 is his range right now.
Do you think with him specifically, I like from what I've seen, has a really good feel, sees the floor, can in a pretty advanced way for his age. I have some questions about like his ability to create separation. It's interesting you mentioned LaMelo Ball because it's actually kind of one of the issues with him is that he's just doesn't have the burst to score in traffic. He, will get a guy on his back and then not know what to do with it in the pick and roll. So you have that. That's one concern I have for Topic. And then the other one was the 3-point shooting. Like which of those two areas do you think are going to be, pretend the ACL is not an issue, teams evaluating his skill set, which of those two areas are like maybe bigger points of concern?
Yeah. I think I think he's just going to be a little bit too predictable to guard. Like, what he wants to do. He wants to get downhill. He wants to get to the paint. That's his bread and butter. He's very good around the basket, like shielding his man, finishing, creating angles for himself around the basket. So what he wants to do. So it's a matter of, is he going to develop that pull-up game? And he's always been an 80% free throw shooter, which is, always a promising indicator. And the difference between shooter and shot maker, he doesn't have to be a shooter. He's just got to be a shot maker. He's got to threaten enough away from the basket. And he's very confident guy. Like, I know his percentages wasn't great, but he had a couple games where he hit 3 threes once he's, the confidence started pumping, and he could hit them, in different ways. It's a little bit like a set shot almost. It's not the prettiest to look at, but at 6'6", I think he can get away with it a little bit. But I think in the beginning he's going to have to. Teams are going to know exactly what he wants to do, so he's going to have to counter and then work on that pull up game and floater, because those are areas that he need that are, I'd say, weaknesses and areas that he definitely needs for the NBA.
Would you be able to explain to me what I'm missing that has so many people smitten with Donovan Clingan? When I watch him, I don't see it. Is he going to be someone who could defend outside drop coverage? The playmaking, it can pop, but it feels like all his playmaking comes from basically dead stop situations. I think you had mentioned in your latest mock, or I don't know, you're putting them up so much, I don't know if your latest one, that there was it was like, but people are intrigued by the empty gym threes that he's hitting. Is that like a real? What am I actually? I know he's massive, but like, what am I missing on this guy? Or why am I devout? Like, can you sell me on Donovan Clingan? I'm basically asking you.
No, I would be the wrong person to sell you. I mean, personally, I never put him super high on my board. Again, I think it's part of this, just like the season is 4 months and teams are just looking for, you just start to like look for new people to rise at the end. And of course he goes to the national championship game. And again, you're like hoping for new stars, and people talk themselves into like this level of upside. I had a scout reach out to me the other day and I hit a good comp. I thought it was the best one I've heard was Roy Hibbert. I think that was a pretty fair.
It's not what you want to hear in 2024.
Yeah.
No, I know. Well, I put it this way. That scout was also asking the same question.
Yeah.
Why do people like Clingan so much?
Yeah.
He's right. I think he's going to make his money just by being massive around the basket and being an easy basket target, getting you second chance points and making, other than just protecting the rim, making teams change their decisions on drives. And like, can he guard in space? Like in certain situations, probably. I mean, I think Zach Edey can too. I mean, I think we overrate that like on ball defense a little too much. He's very good at putting himself in the right positions and anticipating a little bit off the ball and stuff. So I do think he's going to be a good rim protector, definitely a starting caliber center, and maybe, one of a mid-range starting NBA center, like a Jakob Poeltl or something like that. I don't see the like number one overall. I don't see how that could even be in the cards here. And the shooting that you mentioned, I said, I gotta say, I watched him at the combine for like an hour by himself, and he was very convincing. Not like he was going to come in and start shooting threes right away, but it looked like something he'd been doing his whole life. Like if you had never watched Clingan shoot a basketball and you watched him shoot by himself, you'd think that like he makes threes on a regular basis. And so there's just something about the comfort level that makes you suggest, okay, maybe 3-4 years down the line, he's going to do what Brook Lopez did. Maybe not to that degree, but like somebody who could actually, just by stepping out and hitting a three per game or taking a couple, I think would be a big deal for his offense, because I don't really see anything else translating other than like low post stuff, putbacks, and finishes.
So to pivot from someone that we're asking you to explain, like, why is this guy regarded this highly, to someone where it's the opposite, and you have no reason to know this, but I'm in the bag for Jalen Williams. And so to see Cody Williams and some of the measurables, and I saw the 7'1" wingspan, and just explain to me why he's not viewed as someone, or maybe he is, maybe you do view him this way, as someone.
Why isn't he I'm
why
sorry,
isn't he number one?
Why isn't he the number one pick?
One prospect?
I'm just like, he was in the bag for Jalen Williams. I'm in the bag for Cody Williams. Is it the low volume from three, the ankle injury? I think in one of your mocks you had mentioned that there's concerns about character issues. I watched this guy and everything about him just pops.
So I'll tell you right now, I'm in the middle of writing something, and actually the mock draft that came out today moved him up to number 5.
Okay.
And so one of the things I'm hearing most, first off, he's the most asked about prospect that I get from teams. Like, what do you think about Cody Williams? Like, I get that a lot. And he's also the most picked guy when we're having conversations. It's like a guy who can go earlier and surprise more than anybody else. It's Cody Williams. Like, I put him at number 5. I know I had somebody a scout reach out to me yesterday saying he doesn't think he gets past Detroit. Of course, a week ago I had him going 13. Like, listen, you guys talked about the draws to him. You got to start with the negatives and why you wouldn't take him early. And it's just, I think he's pretty raw offensively. It's like, okay, so what is he going to do? Right. The low volume from 3, not a great free throw shooter. He was not known as a 3-point shooter coming into the year. So when you take the low volume into equation, like, you wonder how fluky the 3-point shooting really is. He has no pull-up game at all. I think he made 5 pull-ups all season. So that's not really part of his game either. So if you're a skeptic, you question whether the shot making is going to translate. And, he's going to be an off-ball guy. Like, he's not somebody you give the ball to and say, go create for me, go make a play. So if you're not a knockdown shooter off the ball, you have to find other ways to contribute. And I think that he can, just not to a high enough degree where you want to take him super early in the draft. But I think the sales pitch to him on the flip side, and Dan, like, being a New Yorker, you see how valuable OG Anunoby was as a guy, despite not be able to create his own shot. Like, if you take really efficient complementary offense and pair it with valuable wing defense, like, you get a very valuable player, even if he can't put the ball on the floor and make plays for himself. And so I think that's the draw. And then you throw into the fact, okay, he is Jalen Williams' brother. Listen, we can't ignore that. Like, he's got a blueprint here on how to get better. And he's young. I don't remember. I don't know I don't know what the character thing you mentioned was, because I think he's got mostly good intel. And
I apologize if I assigned it to you and it was someone else. I've taken in so much draft content over the
yeah. No, I think he's got a pretty good reputation, and just watching him play, like, he plays the right way. He doesn't take any bad shots. He plays within the flow, 60% inside the arc, of course, 40% from three on the low volume, because he only takes the good ones. He takes the rhythm ones. And so he's not going to hurt you. A bad game from Cody Williams won't hurt you. Now, he's going to be vulnerable to scoring like 4 points because he can't make things happen for himself. But he's pretty good off the ball in terms of getting himself in position to, make a cut or get out in the break and finish, and, that off-ball stuff. So I think in this draft, you take it, you see a high floor, you see a valued archetype as a big wing, 7'1" wingspan, who off-ball stuff in the defense. And then you just kind of say, I'm going to bet on a 19-year-old who's got a brother who's a star in the NBA. I'm just going to bet on him maximizing his potential.
Hey, if you're going to bet on
described my entire case for believing in him.
Some team might bet on someone who has a 40-year-old father who's a star in the NBA. Where are you at with Modest Buzelis? Where is there like some of the, I don't know, like the stink of the defunct G League Ignite emanating off of him, or if there kind of enough that I don't want to call them red flags, but concerns with him? Like, because I've seen him. Well, I guess this entire class is about being mocked all over the place, but I look at him and he's another prospect that I looked at and feels like could be super plug and play. It feels like there's, especially when he's in the open floor, like there's a lot more physical tools, and I think sometimes he can give off. So what's the skinny on Buzelis?
I think he's going top 5.
Okay.
I think from first of all, his camp is, and every camp thinks they're going top 10, top 5. So let's take that with a grain of salt, but his camp is pretty confident. And people around the league kind of agree when they say that. Like, when I say I hear Buzelis is going top 5, they all are like, yeah, probably. I think he's going to look great in an empty gym. I'll tell you that. And I know sometimes that could be, you could be very persuasive in that environment. And he is, yeah, right. He's 6'9". He's one of the best athletes in the draft. He was a 40% shooter in high school, so I know he didn't shoot very well in the G League, but in an empty gym, he could probably catch fire and convince some people to forget the percentages. And yeah, there's enough flashes of him like making plays off the dribble, and fallaways and some shot making diversity. Like, he potentially checks a lot of boxes. Now, is he going to put it all together? Again, there's some guesswork in that, but I think another guy with a valued archetype is one of those big wings who could play the 3, the 4, maybe even the 2 if his shot continues to improve. And he's got a little bit of an edge to him. I mean, I think he was a little bit, it was just kind of frustrating to watch him with Ignite, because like he'd have a good game and you think he'd turn the corner, and then he'd go a week straight, like shooting, 3 for 14, or like, missing 5 of his 6 threes. So it was kind of just frustrating, but it's such a small sample size. Realistically, when we're thinking about it, and teams have seen him in high school for a while now, saw him in high school a while, I should say. And so I think teams are going to kind of ignore some of the percentages there, the inconsistency, by the archetype, by the likelihood of improvement. And so, yeah, and he's going to fit with everybody.
I want to, unless you got more on him, Dan, I want to pivot to Reed Sheppard, who certainly of the guys we've talked about so far, and I think, more broadly of anyone we would discuss in, the lottery, I'd say he's different in that, like, there are things that he does demonstrably, like, exceptionally well. And the question for him is not like, well, what's he going to develop into? To me, it seems it's more like, well, will it translate, or can it hold up against bigger, more athletic competition, more sophisticated defenses on down the list? So the shooting, tell me if this is wrong. The shooting, it's just like, I can't fathom how it wouldn't translate at the next level. Just maybe the types of looks he gets will be different, but there's sort of not a type of 3 that I don't believe is going in when he shoots it. But with that, like, is the threat of that enough to overcome the potential for him to struggle as an on-ball guy, to maybe kind of fall into that, oh, actually he's an undersized 2, so that comes with its own set of problems? Is the shooting good enough? Will it be versatile enough? Will will it carry over enough to offset some of the other concerns that you have with guys, or not you, but that people have with guys like Sheppard, that it's just like, well, okay, it looks awesome at the collegiate level. Are all of the things that sort of get in the way of players and prospects like him against NBA competition, are those going to be too much to have some carryover from college?
I don't think so. I'm betting on him. I have him top 3. I think
Okay.
he's going to be one of those Kentucky guys who like was just like held back a little bit. He came off the bench a lot. He did a lot of spotting up. I think if you gave him the ball more, you'd see like he's got some stuff. He could do some things. Obviously, there's going to be some issues in terms of positional size and guarding one-on-one, but he had like the most efficient season of any guard I've ever watched since I've been doing this. And sometimes, I personally am not going to overthink it. Like, I just think he is so skilled and so smart that he's going to just find ways. I'm not going to compare him to Jalen Brunson, but the way that Brunson kind of just defied the typical laws of upside. Like, we pretty much looked at Brunson and said, okay, you're 6'1", you're not quick, you're not explosive. Like, these parts of your game, the scoring stuff is just not going to translate because you just don't have the right tools or burst or quickness. Like, I'm just going to buy the effectiveness that I just saw, and him shooting whatever ridiculous percentage he shot, both inside the arc and outside the arc, and plays on and off the ball. And everyone you talk to about him is like, this kid's just a great kid. Like, again, just somebody you want to bet on. And he's, to me, somebody I would just bet on, kind of defying the traditional rules of upside.
Well, and to like, again, it seems like every analytics based guy, person in the draft world is like, well, this guy, if you're just looking at numbers and efficiency and like his impact, it's like, well, he should be the number 1 pick. What are we doing? It's fascinating to hear, sort of the anecdotal stuff about him also sort of make it seem like he should be drafted really high. So like, what's the farthest you see him falling realistically?
Detroit at 5.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think he's going to fall. I mean, I guess it depends on who else is on the board and stuff, but like, he's not falling. I mean, he's not somebody who's going to slip into the late lottery. What is it? Charlotte, Portland. I can't see him getting past Detroit. I mean, I just think everybody nobody doesn't really like him. Everybody likes him. And I think, again, in this draft, you value certainty over upside, and everyone just likes him, likes what he does well. And then again, like, you take the floor, you take the strengths that are valued, I think, with the shooting, obviously the passing IQ. I mean, his defensive playmaking rates were like unheard of. I think he had over 20 blocks. He's 6'1". He's just one of those guys you just bet on. And you love his floor. You love what will translate. The question is, what won't translate? What will he get better at? I think somebody is just going to say, screw it. I'm going to take a chance on this guy.
Speaking of undersized guards, Rob Dillingham, I would be smitten with him if he was like 2 inches taller. I've seen him listed at 6'3". He doesn't really look 6'3". What is the offensive package is just bonkers. It's like organized chaos, everything that I watched of him. What is sort of this swing determination, whether it's a concern or a strength, that's going to kind of impact his draft stock the most? Like, obviously we're asking you basically, where do you see all these guys falling? But when you're looking for the general impression of him, everyone knows what he can do on offense. Is there like a concern or a swing skill, or is it just the size that's going to impact his draft stock the most?
I think it's the size mixed with what he struggles with, which could be defense and shot selection. Like, if he's, has inefficient games offensively and kills you defensively, it's just such a turnoff. I think to visualize him, the best, he has exact identical measurements as Trae Young, like to the inch and to the pound. He's 164. He's 6'1" in socks. And he's got a 6'3" wingspan. Those are exactly Trae's measurements, at least at the combine. And so I think that just helps you kind of picture him on the floor. But he just doesn't, at that size, he doesn't have Trae's playmaking. Like, he's just a wired scorer. Now, of course, he'll get you 5 assists just because of how elusive he is, and how creative he is off the bounce, and naturally that's going to translate to assist opportunities. But the pitch against him, or the reason not to take him, right, is because he's terrible defensively, and offensively he just relies on such a tough shot diet. And at 6'1", without much athleticism, like, is he going to? The margin for error is just so small with Dillingham. But on the other hand, there's nobody in the draft that's better with the ball than Rob. I do think he slips in this draft. I've heard teams that that are just flat out like not interested. And you got to worry about fit. Like, so I guess it becomes okay later in the lottery when you're like, sure, I'll take a 6-man. If you already have a point guard, depending on how big he is, the idea of Rob playing the 2 and playing against and having to guard guys who are 6'4", 6'5", like it's a little bit worrisome.
Mm-hmm.
But from a skill perspective, there's nobody sharper with the ball. And by the way, one of the things I like most about him that kind of surprised me this year was how good he was off the ball. Like I've been watching him since U16s with USA. He's just like always has the ball in his hands because he's so good with it. Kind of like I'm not comparing him to Kyrie, but like, you want Kyrie with the ball because he could just make things happen. This year he shot like 50% on spot up threes. That was not something I expected. So that does increase his margin for error a little bit if he does go play with another ball dominant guard. But you're more worried about that defensive projection. There's going to be coaches more concerned with Rob than I think the GMs.
Where do you land on Stephon Castle? Is the shooting a big enough concern that could, because when everything you read and watch about him, it feels like he should also be, I probably said this about 6 guys, but a top 5 certainty. And he's kind of been mocked around that area, but where are you sort of at with him right now?
So I just had, there was a report out there going around saying that like he's only going to work out for teams that will allow him to play point guard, or like work out for teams that think, because he was a point guard in high school. Almost like everybody that was a good player was a point guard in high school. Right. But yeah, that's what he played. He's a very good passer. But I was talking to somebody the other day. They're like, that guy is not a point guard. Let's get this. Let's be real here. Like nobody's bringing him in to play point guard. So I think when you kind of take that out of the equation, you buy kind of the versatility over the scoring upside. Like he can slash, he can pass. He could defend a couple of different positions, the offensive rebounds, but he's not a great creator. He's not a great shooter. Like he reminds me of Josh Hart. That's the type of role I picture him playing for a team. And he's like he impacts games, and every game it could be a different way that he's going to impact the game for you. He can make some plays on the ball. He can play off the ball, doing certain things, cutting, getting out in the break, crashing the glass. I just don't think there's one thing he does so well, particularly on the ball. And that's kind of why I would hesitate to take him, at least if your idea of taking him is that he's going to be the guy making plays for my team. Like I like him in that Josh Hart role. I don't think there's anything wrong with that in this draft if you're talking about a pick in that 6 to 10 range.
Yeah, I saw an Andre Iguodala comp on him, and I lit up, and then I watched some more film, and I was like, I'm not sure I'm seeing the offensive vision and all that stuff there.
Yeah, he really can pass like off the live dribble. It's just, Iguodala, at least in his prime, was like a high flyer, and Castle struggles around the basket. He's not somebody who's going to like blow by anybody. Maybe with some like, some deceleration stuff and some slower stuff, but like he just doesn't like. Remember when Iggy was like a dunk contest guy? Like Castle's mostly below the rim.
Yeah. Is it Bronny time, Dan? Do we need to do the Bronny question?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's just get it over with.
Is it sound bait if it's in a podcast?
It's just all bait.
It's all bait. It's all bait.
So
yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, you've probably been asked it 1,000 times. Like, is he worth a second round pick? If LeBron James is not his father, like, is he in the conversation for being drafted if his name is Bronny Smith?
I don't see it. I just don't see it.
And why not specifically?
I'm not like defense alone for a guard for 6'1" guard isn't enough. It's just not enough. And I really do think he has NBA level defensive potential against ball handlers. I just don't know offensively what he's doing for you. And like, I mean, I like the idea of him, and I've thrown this out there, and I keep getting crushed for it by West Virginia fans and Knick fans. But like, the best case scenario, I got to watch word for word what I say. I'm not comparing him to Miles McBride, but the best case scenario, that's the archetype. That's the type of guy, a 6'1" combo who is like a 3-and-D 6'1" guy, right? That's kind of what Deuce is. I mean, I know in college, right, he made a lot more plays off the dribble, and there was a little bit more like excitement and pop to his game. But I mean, realistically, neither of them are high level creators. They could both play and pick and roll a little bit, but I think for Bronny to work, he's got to be a very, again, the margin for error with a 6'1" guard who's not like a blow by guy is so small. He's got to be a good shooter, and that's just to stick. I think to stick in the league, because I don't see what else he's going to do for you offensively.
Does he? I mean, some of the standstill stuff looks okay, but is there much projectable future in him because McBride's going to hit him on the move now, and like, is that in Bronny's game? Is that something you have confidence based on his mechanics, based on like how he's been used, that could be there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a shot doctor. I'm not going to say like looking at him, do I think he can improve? Like he's always had like a technically sound jump shot. He was known as a shooter in high school. So I was a little bit disappointed to see him shoot 26% from three in college, mostly playing just as a spot up guy. Like I thought his numbers should have been higher, but yeah, I mean, like I watched him work out in the combine. I watched him go like an entire minute, just movement shooting, hitting three after three after three. I think he made 12 straight in the movement shooting drill that I saw. And so, yeah, can he do it? Yeah. But like it's not just about, can he do it? He's got to be good at it. He's got to be like, in the upper echelon of movement and spot up shooters, because on the ball, I mean, like, yeah, he's a good decision maker. The intangibles are there, but again, I just don't know if it's enough. I just don't know if it's enough to have a regular spot in a rotation. Like, can you stick it on an NBA roster? Sure. I mean, I keep mock drafting him 55 to the Lakers. First of all, I just can't picture another team like taking him away.
I would totally use, doesn't like Philly have 52 or something? I would like, you could, at that point, you might just be able to get your guy as an undrafted guy. So I'm taking on the off chance, if it's that low, I'm absolutely gaming it and saying, you know what, I'm going to, on the off chance that especially with LeBron being a free agent, I'm absolutely doing that. I'm not burning like a top 40 pick or something on him, I don't think. But if I'm Philly or Golden State, even, where's Golden State? Like, I'm totally sniping the Lakers.
I guess it could be seen as like bad business. Like you can make like enemies that way. He's just not that. This is my personal opinion. I just don't think he's that. I really don't see an NBA player right now. So to kind of take a guy that late and then deal with the media attention you're going to get every day. Is he going to play? Is Bronny going to play? Like, you're going to have to go through that every single day. And like the traffic with Bronny, his name more than any other, more than Zion, more than like Luka, more than Wemby. Like, I think the numbers with him from a media standpoint, from a fan standpoint, is higher than any of those guys. So you bring Bronny in, and the conversation around your team just changes. He's just not, to me, if you're another team, he's just not worth it to have that, constant having to talk about it. And so to me, I can't imagine a team taking that risk and dealing with all that attention for a guy who's most likely, maybe he makes the roster. Like I just don't see how he doesn't end up in LA.
I could envision owners like pushing for it, because like I'm assuming he'll be a storyline to follow, maybe puts butts in seats or gets more attention, but
he's not going to play. But he's not going to play. Like, people are going to come watch him sit in the bench, and then I've heard another thing, like he'll make what did the scout tell me? It said he'll make your G League team money. Like, maybe I can't. That's
don't they pay people to attend G League games?
Right. And even that, like, I can't. I mean, after like the 30th game, are people going to come watch Bronny? I don't know. These all just sound like crazy ideas to bring him in.
The other thing that I always thought was wild too is this idea. I know LeBron wants to play with his son, but like, if I was 19, like, do I want my dad around like my job, like 24/7 type deal? No. So like, I feel like that part of the discussion is, okay, LeBron might want to do this. What about what Bronny actually wants? Like, maybe he doesn't want to be around his dad that often at this time.
I wouldn't want to play with my dad, particularly if my dad was LeBron. Like, there's like going to be like, it's just going to be constant. Like, I think at this point, Bronny wants to, just from, seeing him deal with media, like he tries to avoid it. Like, I remember the same thing happened with LaMelo. By the time LaMelo got to the NBL, I remember in high school, that was like, he was peak. Like, he wanted to be away from the cameras. I'm sure early in high school, like, you love the cameras. By now he's sick of them. It would mean more cameras in his face. I just don't see why he'd want to play with his dad. But I mean, maybe I'm wrong, and I very well could be wrong. This is just like instincts. Like, I just can't picture a team like taking him.
A couple kind of folded together ones here. Whether we've talked about them or not, are there prospects that I'm sure there are? Which prospects, I guess, is the better way to frame it. Are you like significantly higher on than consensus and lower? Like, who are your guys that, maybe when you look at where, the conventional wisdom is on them, you're more out of step with, whether on the high end or the low end?
All right, Isaiah Collier, that's somebody I'm higher on. And this is weird because I was the opposite early on, but like the narrative with him, he came in like the first couple of weeks of the season, he was projected number one. By ESPN had him one. I think I had him at least in the top 3. And then everybody kind of like cooled off and jumped off the wagon. And then I think it got to a point where it's like people just want to ride with that storyline. Like I still think Isaiah Collier is going to be a very valuable NBA player. If you look at him in a different light, I think everybody's worried about like, all right, he's a ball dominant guy who turns the ball over a lot and doesn't shoot well. But if you picture him, instead of focusing on like, picturing him being a 30-minute starting point guard, if you're talking about a late lottery pick who's like, a spark off the bench, I don't know. I could just see Collier being a steal if he slips too far. KJ Simpson from Colorado is a guy who I have as like one of my favorite sleepers of the draft. And he played really well at the combine. So I don't know how much he's going to fall anymore. I'm told that at least his people think he's, an early second round pick, maybe late first, probably early second. He's somebody I have on steal watch. And then Jalen Tyson from Cal is somebody I really like. Is like, if we're just talking about, okay, go get me a pro, forget ceiling. And we're talking about picks like late first round stuff. I think Jalen Tyson is a pretty good bet to be a pro, 6'8", very versatile and skilled scorer. Although right before we got on the pod, I just got a text saying that like he's got a lot of interest in the top 20. So I don't know how much he slips, but those are, I guess he's not like a household name that somebody I would bring up as I really like next year.
Is there anyone you particularly don't like? Not that you hate them specifically, but that you're just lower on relative to them?
I have no personal beefs with any of these guys. Tijan Salon is like a hot name right now. He's trending like towards the top 10. It sounds like I don't see it. I mean, I could see why a team would like him. He's 18 still. He's starting in the French playoffs. Probably 6'9", 6'10", made over 73s this year, but I don't see what else he does. So like there's so much riding on him being a good 3-point shooter. And I'm just not confident enough to buy it just based on watching him shoot like moon balls that look like they would touch the ceiling of an NBA arena. I just can't buy it. Risacher at 1. I would say that's if I were to grade the picks, which I hate doing, I would not give that a good grade at number 1.
Because he's not Cody Williams, right?
I won't mention Cody Williams. I was thinking about mentioning Cody Williams but no, actually I kind of on this pod, I talked myself into him a little bit and listening to you guys and hearing it out loud about when I brought up the OG thing. Like I could picture him being like a very high level complimentary guy. Sometimes we overrate the on ball stuff. Like you could be such a valuable NBA player and not be the most high level creator. But anyway, and then Clingan is another guy. I think, if we're talking about top 5, I just think that as the season went on, we're kind of just looking for, we're like, trying to like imagining star potential. I just don't see it there.
Before we force you to go through more sound bait, is there a question, whether it's philosophically about covering the draft in general, whether it's about this class, maybe a specific player or issue, that when you're doing these podcasts, these hits, these TV spots, no one ever asks you that you wish that they would ask you?
Yeah. Who are the guys you got right? I only hear about who are your biggest screw ups. No, I guess, we never talk about like how I see things have changed from my first time watching till now. I guess maybe we do it indirectly. I talk about it, how they've progressed, but I think that's a good question. Like from day 1 of the season till 2 weeks before the draft, like which of your evaluations has totally changed the most? That would be the question.
Okay, well then answer that question.
Thanks for doing our job for us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, it would be
like who and why has changed the most.
Well, Reed Sheppard is like the obvious name. Like Reed Sheppard was a big time high school kid, and you just never in a million years would I picture him doing what he did this year. And even Rob Dillingham, I remember going through my pre-draft process, and I had seen Dillingham a ton coming into the season. So it's not like, oh, that freshman's pretty good. It was like, I've seen him a lot, and I still had him I think I may have ranked him like 48. Like I just snuck him into the top 50 because I just didn't see like an NBA guy. He was just too like a Bones Highland best comp type of guy. And then now we're talking about a potential top 10 pick because of how efficient he was. Like, I don't know how he was efficient. And Kentucky, to me, I would have been like, this guy's going to shoot 36% from the floor. He's going to average more turnovers than assists. And he did the total opposite. So to me, I guess Dillingham is also another guy, the Kentucky boys.
If you had to take a victory lap all time of the prospect that you were right, like most right on compared to, who would it be, since you mentioned that before?
I mean, this is a stupid answer, but it's the one I'm most proud of because I kind of, so Luka, with Luka, obviously not, I mean, we could talk about like sleepers, like Desmond Bane. They had Tyrese Maxey top 10. Like those are good hits relative to what they were taking.
Those are hits.
Those are hits. But I mean, like over the years, obviously there's a lot of guys who went in the 20s who I had, top 10. I'm not bragging because there's plenty of guys I screwed up on. But with Luka, I spoke to a lot of people like around Dallas. Like there was not super confidence in Luka at the time. I remember I had a good conversation with people in Dallas, and we kind of talked it out. And then they ended up going up and training for Luka. And like, I don't know, that was like a cool moment for me.
We do this thing around these parts. It's called stat padding, so we don't try to hide it. Where we're asking questions, the other one they answer them, no justification, just the names of the players or whatever it is. So we were hoping that you would run through some, I guess, NBA draft rapid fire superlatives. And so, who would be first off? And I guess Grant and I can alternate here. Who are your three most skilled pick and roll initiators in this year's draft class?
Rob Dillingham, Nikola Topic, Jared McCain.
All right. So who would you have as your three best rim protectors in this draft?
Donovan Clingan. I guess Alex Sarr. Like maybe there are better shot blockers out there, but realistically, he's going to be a starting. And then I'll throw in a wild card, Ryan Dunn. Ryan Dunn's more of a forward, but that dude from his off-ball rim protecting as a wing is wild. I mean, I think he had like a 10% block percentage as a wing. I mean, that guy's a different type of rim protection, but I'll throw him in there. I mean, Yves Missi from Baylor is more of a traditional rim protector, but Dunn is like more of an exciting rim protector.
Who are your three most dangerous motion shooters from this draft class?
Cam Spencer from Connecticut, who I don't know if he gets drafted, but man, that guy he scored the majority of his points off screens. Baylor Shireman from Creighton, and either Jared McCain or Dalton Connect. Both of them are just so like technically, fundamentally sound with their feet, curling into those shots.
Who are your three best on-ball defenders in this class?
I think it could be, well, there's two guards who are like easy answers. Reese Beekman from Virginia and Jamal Shedd from Houston. Those are your Patrick Beverly types, like your Javon Carters. Like that's what they're going to make their money on. And I think Terrence Shannon from Illinois, like 6'6", long, super quick. Like he could be a lockdown guy.
And who are your three best individual isolation scorers in this draft class?
Rob Dillingham, AJ Mitchell from Santa Barbara. That guy he looks like a poor man's version of Jalen Brunson, just like super slow, but gets to his spots, hits like really tough mid-range shots. And then I think this is like a weird answer, but he was very efficient in isolation this year. It's Nick Topic, who just really used his like timing to blow by guys and his long strides and his length. Like you knew how to guard him and you still couldn't stop him from getting to the basket and finishing. And he's got to improve percentage wise, but he can pull up. And when he starts to get hot, he's just going to shoot right over his guy as a 6'6" point guard. So he was a very efficient isolation player.
I guess the final part here. So based off what you know of this draft class and then of these players that we're about to mention in the NBA, we want to run you through an exercise of, would you rather use the 2024 NBA draft's number one pick or acquire this player? And so we'll start with, would you rather have the number one pick in this year's draft or Mikal Bridges?
Mikal Bridges. I got a feeling I'm going to say a lot of the players you're about to mention.
That's kind of the idea. This is like we're going to scratch the curiosity itch about like how good is this draft actually. What about Jamal Murray?
Jamal Murray, I would take. First of all, before we go down the list and I start saying yes to all the NBA players you're going to say, it's because I there's just the level of uncertainty. Like I don't have, this is probably the least amount of confidence I had in who's going to be the number one pick in a draft in years.
Wow.
Right. Like even, I don't know who's going to be the best player. I really don't. I'd be lying if I said I had confidence in my own personal rankings this year.
Okay.
This is the lowest confidence I have. So knowing that, I'm going to take certainty over uncertainty.
Would you rather have the number one pick or Jamal Murray?
Yeah.
I just asked him Jamal Murray.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
The next one is the good one because there's similar levels of uncertainty. What about Sarr Thompson?
I would take the number one pick.
Okay.
The number one pick or Karl Anthony Towns?
How old is Towns right now?
28, 29, maybe. I'll double check.
It really depends on who I'm.
He's
picking
28.
for.
He turns 29 in November.
It depends. If I'm Atlanta, I will take Towns. If I'm Atlanta.
Okay. What about Franz Wagner? We talked about him a little bit earlier.
I love Franz, but I would take the number one pick.
Okay.
The number one pick or wing Jalen Williams?
By the way, let me go back for a second because my personal number one has not been mentioned yet. That's Ron Holland. I think Ron Holland's the best player in the draft.
Wait a minute. How do we get this?
Well,
forget this other stuff. Explain what do you love about Ron Holland?
It's funny. I just got.
We got 2 minutes.
No, I just think that people are putting too much stock into his shot, and I think he's. I think he is. Again, another guy I've watched develop, like keep getting better. Guy averaged, he's 18 years old the whole season. He averaged 20 points in the G League, and we're just gonna like ignore it. And he didn't do it he did it on 47%. And he just got he's one of the best athletes in the draft. He is 6'8" in sneakers. He's long. He's gotten so much better at creating for himself. Like I thought, I had a number one entering the season, and then he was a much better self-creator than I thought he would be. And yeah, he didn't shoot very well from three, and he's probably never going to be a great shooter. But I think he's so good elsewhere. I'm not comparing him to Jaylen Brown, but like the way that Jaylen Brown doesn't have to be a 40% 3-point shooter, like he can get to certain spots and make tough shots, and then when he's hot, he can make open threes. And there's so much room for him to grow, and I still think he's going to come in and put up points right away. So anyway, I'm a big Holland guy, but yeah. Holland.
And where do you is he like someone that you could see slipping? Like you have him super high, but what are you getting on a feel when it comes to either NBA teams or agents or whatever? And I think I'm actually scrolling through because you published your latest mock test. You have him going 9. Would you say that's like could he fall lower than that? Could you see him going a lot higher than that?
He can go lower. And I'm here. It's driving me like I spoke to a GM who said his pro day his shooting was so bad it turned a lot of people off. Like I think a pro day, you're supposed to, even though everyone knows not to put too much stock into it, you're supposed to like ease concerns over 26%. Like this is like the layup that you have to make people feel a little bit better. And he didn't make people feel a little bit better in an empty gym. And I think that turned people off. I don't know how you put any stock at all into a pro day. They're the worst hour like of my life. I hate those things. But yeah, people don't see him. Don't like. I mean, everyone seems to like. Everyone's like, yeah, I like him. But sounds like they're willing to take a chance on somebody who's a little bit further ahead as a shooter. But I think teams are kind of overthinking it with Holland. I think he's just like, again, what I said before, one of the best athletes in the draft. He just continues to get better on the ball, and I buy the shot making just good enough right now where I think he could be like an adequate shooter to mix with the shot making diversity that he's got inside the arc.
Was, this was great. Thank you for giving us so much of your time. Are you able just to tell our listeners where they can find you and all the fantastic work that you're putting, all the Ron Holland propaganda?
Wait, can I stop you for 1 second? I'm so curious who the other NBA guys you're going to throw out there.
Oh yeah, well we can finish the exercise then. So should we frame it as would you rather have Ron Holland or so at this point?
Yeah, because that's why I brought it up. That made me think of what I brought up. Because in my head I'm thinking, would I rather have Ron Holland? I would rather have Ron Holland than Franz Wagner. Like that was the way I was thinking about it in my head.
All right, so let's redo it this way. Would you rather have Ron Holland or Mikal Bridges? I'm
still going Bridges. I think Bridges is great, right? I mean, you guys watch more than me.
Ron Holland or Jamal Murray?
I'm still going Murray just because I'm still going Murray.
You sold me on Holland. I'm going Holland there. I'm not going to lie. Ron Holland or Sarr Thompson?
Definitely Holland.
Ron Holland or Karl Anthony Towns?
Right. It depends what team I'm going for. Like, I guess if you're Atlanta and you're really trying to make things happen now, I guess Towns, I guess. But let's look pretty close. But I would take Towns.
Where did you land on Ron Holland or Franz Wagner?
I would take Ron Holland.
Ron Holland or wing Jalen Williams in OKC?
Man, Jalen Williams. Like, I just know that Jalen Williams is an all-star, like, any day.
Grant is officially good.
You're speaking my language.
I mean,
Ron Holland or Kobe White?
Ron Holland.
Ron Holland or Denny Avdia?
Ron Holland.
Ron Holland or Alperen Şengün?
Ron Holland, but I mean, I don't know where Şengün's game is going to go. I also haven't watched Şengün as much over the last couple of years, but I've seen what he's done, but I haven't really seen it, like, watch it like grow, on a regular basis. But so I say Holland, but not with a ton of confidence, because Şengün obviously has, like, he could go to a crazy, strange level of good.
We might have needed to have upped Andy here, Grant. Like, is this a Ron Holland?
I was trying to pick guys
situation?
that were like, like Avdia and Kobe White for sure are kind of like,
yeah,
okay, these guys they're starters, but they're not gonna blow your socks off. But yeah, I don't know. I had I known it was Ron Holland specifically we were going to be comparing to, I would have tried to think of some more similar guys, like, I don't know, like Jalen Johnson or something like that. You'd probably take Holland over him too.
Again, another guy. By the way, Jalen Johnson was one of my best hits. I think I had him five.
I love it. We
Dude,
all got to take our victory laps. It's
he's
important.
about to get maxed, I think. So that's a huge hit on your part.
Yeah, that's definitely someone I should think of, like, when somebody asks me that question. But yeah, I mean, by the way, like, there are very smart people who don't think Holland is, like, a top 8 pick. So
you're the only smart person.
Like I said, my level of confidence this year at number 1 is lower than I can remember it being, and I usually do pretty well with the number 1 guys. Most people do, but yeah, I would take Holland 1, but, like, if he wasn't the best player, if he wasn't, a top 3 player from this draft, like, it wouldn't be totally shocking.
Since we skipped, he wasn't the outline, but since we skipped over him, is there anyone else that we skipped over, didn't ask you about, that he turned out to be your number 1 prospect? So that turns out to be very oversight. Is there anyone or anything else about this draft, the prospects, anything that we didn't ask you about that you'd like to hit on?
Did you ask me about Bronny James?
Yeah, let's do like 3 more laps on Bronny.
Yeah, we did not ask you about Zach Edey, so it wasn't like a full soundbait episode.
Yeah, that would probably be the guy I would have brought up as just somebody what I'm hearing, people, there's a rumor going around, at least in, like, the scouting world, that he's going to go in the lottery, which is wild.
Wow.
But so we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if, like, in the next wave of green room invites, Edey gets one.
What's more likely from him, that he ends up having, like, a real volume, operable 3-point stroke, or he can exist outside of drop coverage on defense?
I think he's more mobile defensively than he gets credit for. I'm not buying any shooting.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought Walker Kessler wasn't going to be good defensively in the NBA. So what do I know at this point? Was, all right, this was fantastic. Thank you again for giving us a bunch of your time. Are you just able to tell our listeners where they can find you and all the great work that you're putting out?
NBA Draft Was on Twitter. I'm doing the coverage for NBA TV during the draft, the day before the draft, and the pre-draft show the 26th, the day of the draft. And then maybe, depending, honestly, if Bronny James doesn't go in the first round, which he won't, they'll probably have a show on the 27th, because he's Bronny James. So NBA TV the week of the draft.
This was great. Again, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure we'll be pestering you again in the future, but we really appreciate it.
All right. Sounds good, fellas. This is fun.
Big thanks again to BR's Jonathan Wasserman, longtime colleague, and now we'll call him a friend of the podcast because he's been on. That's how this works. But I had a lot of fun. We apologize for not, to Wash specifically, Grant, us not. We actively made the decision not to ask him about Ron Holland, then find out that it's number 1. And the only defense we have is that he does mock drafts for BR more than he does big boards. I haven't seen him put up a big board in months, I don't think. So I had no idea it was number 1. I should have looked it up.
I mean, a good incentive to stay till the end, I guess, since we crammed in the Ron Holland analysis in the last 5 minutes. But yeah, hey, if that doesn't tell you that this draft is like a free for all and nobody's really sure about it, and I don't know what does. So yeah, good get. I feel like we really if you are trying to get your hands around this draft, which is a challenge this year more so than most, I think Was is the guy. So I'm really happy. I feel educated. I don't know about you.
So do I. And his ability to shoehorn so much information into just like these succinct pockets is also super valuable, because like especially when you're doing I'm sure maybe he's forced to do it, but like when we're trying to force him to cover so much ground in about an hour or so, you and I specifically want to go more in depth on everything, or just like maybe over talk it out. His ability to just like, that has to be the most ground we've covered in less than 80 minutes in forever, maybe like of all time.
Without doubt. And so in keeping with that, we're going to stop talking now, and we're going to say thanks to everybody for listening and watching. Thanks again to Was. Awesome, informative, a lot of fun. Really appreciate it. If you haven't done so already, rate, review, subscribe. Make sure you are checking out our YouTube clips as well. Support us there. Help us beat the algorithm machine that is.
We are so close, by the way. I don't know if I told you, to 5K subscribers on YouTube. We're at like 4.81.
A special giveaway then to whoever is our 5,000th subscriber. You get to
do this. If you guys want the team by team look aheads again, if we don't get to 5K subscribers by the time free agency, by the end of summer league, there'll be no team look aheads this year.
Yeah, there you go. But
the podcast will shutter altogether. Actually,
I think that's going to do it. Join our Discord. Links for that in YouTube podcast description. Same place you can get info on our merch. Happy opening of draft season for you and me, because it's the first time we've really thought hard about it. We don't have time to do it otherwise. Hope everybody enjoyed it. Shouts, Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.